Welcome to the Let My Life Be a Light podcast. Today, I'm joined by Gage, who is a professional counselor and someone that I really admire because she has a very thoughtful heart and a ton of knowledge on mental health and how people can become more whole and more healed from bad experiences they've had in their lives. Sue, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you, Cassidy. I'm glad I'm here too.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your professional background and why you chose to go into counseling?
Sure. Um, I had my life changed when I was 30 by talking to somebody and learning about how my past and my thoughts affected me. And then I became a discipler at Life Center for Spiritual Growth, which was all based on scripture. And then after my children were raised, I went back and got my master's in counseling. And I've just loved every minute of it.
The work you do is not easy. You meet people at their lowest point in so many cases. Will you tell us a little bit about your professional background? Because today you work with individuals and you meet with people and help
hmm
them with their mental health. But you
hmm
also had a point in your career when you were working specifically with children facing abuse.
hmm hmm Well, I've just seen the results of working with mental health. I've experienced it personally. I started out my internship at Bethany Christian Services in early impact with abused and neglected children. And so I saw the results of people intervening and really putting in resources and different methods to help people be free, even children, um, and how much better their life can be.
Mental health care really is so transformative for people. And hearing
hmm
some of the stories you have shared about working with children has really impacted me
hmm
because it can be, I mean, I can't imagine because I've never had your job, right? But I can't imagine being a
hmm
therapist walking into a family situation like that where you observe that tragically a child
hmm
is a victim of neglect or abuse of some kind,
hmm
and you want to
hmm
help them. And that's
hmm
something that's still on your heart now that you're working with more of an
hmm
adult and like adolescent population. So,
hmm
what were some of the things you saw when you worked with Bethany Christian Services? Some of those things you saw those children suffering from, and how do you think it impacted
hmm
what you decided to do later with your career?
Well, just the need for people to be cared for well, to be listened to. I think that's so important to see that their basic needs are met. Safety is a huge thing. And really, adults deal with the same thing, the same things that children want to be loved and cared for and validated as people. hmm
People go through a lot of difficult things, and many of them
hmm
people will never share. So, a lot of times, people we're walking around near in our workplaces or in our communities
hmm
have all kinds of wounds they've
hmm
experienced mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And
hmm
you kind of go deep with them and help them to heal.
hmm
So, one of the
hmm
things that you're very familiar with and you use in your practice is you talk with people about adverse childhood experiences and how those
hmm
impact mental health. Could you
hmm
tell our listeners a little bit about that and how they
hmm
can identify that if maybe they're suffering from an
hmm
adversity from their childhood?
So children are very vulnerable and they receive messages about themselves and about the world because of the people they're around. Some of those messages are helpful and some of them are very um, hurtful. And so that's really what I do when I meet with adults now is we identify those messages, those beliefs people heard, and try to walk into things that are more helpful, more functional, lining up if you're a person of faith, line up with your faith in agreement with God, his value of people. And so it's very rewarding to see people be set free to walk in who they really are, hmm rather
Well,
than those old beliefs about themselves.
just as you're mentioning there, talking about those old beliefs, what are some common
hmm
beliefs people pick up in childhood that continue to impact
hmm
them into adulthood?
hmm Many times it's questioning their value. Are they a valuable person? Um, can they do anything right? A lot of times people feel they're not good enough, they don't measure up. all that false belief about yourself that you have to perform to be loved and accepted.
Those are powerful messages. And sadly, I think
Yeah.
there is a part of adulthood where sometimes they almost try to
Hmm.
exploit us for those messages. So, for example, if
Hmm.
you work for an unhealthy employer, they would love for
Hmm.
you to think that your only
Hmm.
value is in your performance.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I feel like as an adult, I have learned it's really important that I choose a workplace where they see
Hmm.
me as a person, not just as
Hmm.
someone creating output, because
Hmm.
otherwise it can feed into the message that is a
Hmm.
lie, that you're
Hmm.
only valuable for the work you put out. Because, we're each
Right.
children made by God. We're loved
Hmm.
as children that God has to care for every day, and He loves to care for us.
Right.
But
Right.
sometimes we do get almost into like a bit of a communist mindset that we're all little workers and that the only contribution
Mm.
we make that matters is like what we've
Hmm.
clocked in for and this professional skill we
Right.
have. And so
Hmm.
adults can like sometimes have these very high
Hmm.
rated performance reviews. Like they're look at how
Right.
accomplished I am, these cool
Right.
resumes, and sometimes still be very dysfunctional and disordered inside.
Hmm. Hmm.
How do you help people like that who perhaps are performing very well and very highly at work, but they're maybe
Hmm.
very troubled inside with that belief?
Well, usually people will start talking about what's going on in their inner world. And then you can hear their thoughts about themselves, their desire to be loved and cared for, to be validated. And you just meet people where they're at in those old false belief systems that they have to perform to be accepted and to love. When God accepts people just because He created them, because they're human.
God's love is so
Hmm.
transformative of those false beliefs that many of us have of many different
Hmm.
kinds. How do you help
Hmm.
people when they come
Hmm.
into therapy, they come to see you to help to heal from those wrong ways of
Hmm.
thinking? What are some different
Hmm.
strategies you use to help them overcome wrong ways of thinking?
Well, it's listening from on my part and hearing what they're really believing about themselves. And then we practice developing awareness for the person and how it's affecting them, how it's causing them to function or not function. And so all those things are in place. And once people understand and they can practice awareness, then they can choose to walk in a new way of living.
Much more peace that way. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Self-awareness is actually a very difficult skill for many adults because sometimes it feels easier to feel
Hmm.
overwhelmed or to feel
Right,
uncomfortable and to just maybe try to
right.
demand something out of
Hmm.
life, to demand things from other
Hmm.
people instead
Hmm.
of really being aware of what's going on inside of
Yeah,
ourselves. But it is really
yeah,
powerful to develop
yeah.
that skill.
And that's part of my role because then I can companion with people and sit with them and work through that together and give people a safe place to develop that awareness because that's kind of hard to do outside. And so we kind of practice it in the therapy room, developing that awareness so they can get comfortable with it and say, oh, that's what's going on inside of me. And this is a result. Do I want to keep having that same results? It's not working well. And most people don't want to.
I look at my own life, Sue, and I know that with the times that I have come and I've sat down with you for therapy, that's something you have helped me to do, is you've helped me to grow in awareness. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes there's this like odd
Mhm.
belief in Christian circles that certain things from mental health are somehow either not helpful or they're just, it's unbiblical to like learn things about
Mhm.
mental health. And the whole field of mental health
Mhm.
itself
Mhm.
obviously has certain parts of it that are not Christian and that are not ethical. Certain things with Freud
Mhm.
did some certain things that were not
Mhm.
good. So we can all agree about that for sure.
Right.
But I think
Right.
mental health is kind of like
Right.
many other fields of study. Like we can learn things from biology, but we don't have
Mhm.
to like maybe take every different
Mhm.
biologist's thoughts and go, oh yes, that's like gospel. Like I think there's
Mhm.
some similarity there that
Mhm.
with mental health, maybe not every discovery or every
Mhm.
view of mental health is helpful to the Christian, and some things can
Mhm.
be like not
Mhm.
good for you spiritually. I think
Mhm.
when you meet with a mental health therapist who is a Christian and
Mhm.
whose faith really changes them,
Mhm.
like you, that the integration of Christian faith and mental health skills can actually be so helpful. An
Mhm.
example of that being helpful is I didn't know when I started to come to see you that I did lack self-awareness in some ways. I
Mhm.
wasn't always aware of my
Mhm.
emotional states. So I had very severe major depression when I started to come to
Mhm.
see you. I didn't really know that. I knew I wasn't okay. I knew that I was kind of a troubled adolescent in the way that I just emotionally was not well, even though
Mhm.
I could perform in some ways. So we just talked about performing
Mhm.
earlier, but oh yeah, like here I can be
Mhm.
in school or I can show up for a sports event or something. You can look like you're okay. But I was really suffering in my mental health. A lot of
Mhm.
adolescents go through this in particular
Mhm.
because of family struggles. We had
Mhm.
both a genetic tendency towards depression in my family,
Mhm.
and my parents got separated when I was 17 years old. So we went through what was a lot like a divorce because my parents got legally separated. And so that for me was like some kind of activating event or something for my depression where it became very
Mhm.
severe. So I would
Mhm.
come and I would see you and we'd talk about what I was feeling and thinking. And I've told you many
Mhm.
times how funny it is that somehow you got through to me because I'm very stubborn. I don't always listen immediately. Sometimes I'm like, you really got to win me over. And you
Mhm.
did. You little by little, you helped me to understand how to be more mentally healthy. And that skill of self-awareness is a big part of why I am able to not be massively depressed now as an
Mhm.
older adult. I make myself sound like I'm 95. What I'm trying to say is older than when I was an adolescent, when I first started to come to see you.
Right.
Um, I started to be aware that sometimes certain things were associated with more anxiety. If I didn't sleep
Mhm.
enough, if I wasn't eating good food. So being
Mhm.
able to connect that also gave me some sense of
Mhm.
like control back. So instead of feeling like a victim of my mental health, I said, oh, maybe I should try to prioritize sleeping well. Maybe I should try to
Mhm.
prioritize eating good food. And
Mhm.
with my
Mhm.
depression, I learned, started to
Mhm.
be aware of what makes me feel better. I realized it took me many years to realize this, but I'm very unathletic. But I learned that when I worked out, I felt a
Mhm.
lot better. So I was like, even if I'm unathletic, I'm going to work out because it will help
Mhm.
me. So that little skill of self-awareness may not sound like a big deal,
Mhm.
but I know for me, it almost like played some kind of almost life-saving role where I eventually
Mhm.
started to gain what you've talked about before, more of an internal locus of control by recognizing
Mhm.
I'm not just a victim of my mental health and like it going
Mhm.
poorly and it just everything going downhill. But there are certain things I
Mhm.
can do, like, trying to eat healthier and sleep appropriately and exercise
Mhm.
and take better care of my body. And those things all play a role in how I feel mentally and emotionally.
Mhm.
So that was very helpful to me.
Mhm.
Have you seen that with other clients you've had as well, that when they grow in the skill of self-awareness and they
Mhm.
understand, if they develop more of an internal locus of control versus an external
Mhm.
one, maybe that's impacted them too?
Oh, and it's wonderful to be part of it. And people like you work so hard, and other people work so hard. And it's just wonderful to see people free to enjoy life, enjoy who they are, enjoy who God created them to be. It's really transformational.
Absolutely. And will you tell me about some of the theories in mental health that you put into practice? Because I can think of a few right off
Hmm.
of the bat that I have talked
Hmm.
with you about, like attachment
Hmm.
theory, family
Hmm.
systems, internal family systems.
Hmm.
And for someone who's very not maybe into mental health, can you help them understand how you draw from different theories? And
Hmm.
maybe we don't go only all in one, but maybe use a
Hmm.
variety of them for a
Hmm.
given person?
Yeah, probably the foundational theory is by Carl Rogers, who promoted positive regard for people. So that's really the beginning of a good therapy relationship, to have positive regard for the person you're meeting with. So that's really the most wonderful thing, to value that person. And then you just listen to people and you take from the different theories, internal family systems, whatever a person needs, and just work through it with them. But it's really valuing the person and what they're going through, and finding what theory helps them to move along in life. Cognitive behavior theory, which would really line up with scripture, taking captive every thought to the obedience of Christ, or Romans 12:1 and 2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So those are pretty wonderful basic things to rely on as you meet with people.
Can you explain
Mhm.
attachment theory for someone who's never heard of that before and doesn't know what it is?
Mhm. So people can have secure attachments as they develop in life. Some people have anxious attachments. Some people have disorganized attachment. It affects how they do relationships. And when they become aware of that in themselves, here we say awareness again, they can work with themselves and nurture themselves to develop what they need and understand why they relate to people the way they do. Even it affects our relationship with God, our attachment.
There's a book you've mentioned about attachment theory related to God. What is
Mm-hmm.
that book?
Yeah, God attachments. That's what it was. Yeah. So it's a good book to read to understand how you even relate to God because of your attachment to people. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Or lack of attachment too.
Absolutely. Attachment theory has been very helpful to me in my mental health. Kind of a basic summary
Mm-hmm.
of like the attachments you were describing. So secure attachment is what we all want to have. Like we all want to have really healthy relationships
Mm-hmm.
where you're able to work through your conflicts and you really trust each other and there's just like a good
Mm-hmm.
relationship where you could bring anything to them and you'll work it out. Anxious attachment
Mm-hmm.
is going to be the clingy person. We all know that one person who like they're just like very clingy, like they just really need you to know that they really, really need you. And it just feels a little overbearing to the person who's
Right.
not having anxious attachment. And
Right.
then there's avoidant attachment, kind of the other extreme over here is
Yeah.
like this person
Right.
tends to not want as much emotional depth in their relationship. They like to keep space, but probably more space than what is actually good for them to kind of protect themselves
Mm-hmm.
from others. They tend to lose
Mm-hmm.
interest in relationships when they get close and then they want to back away. Like, woo, that was too close. Um, and then disorganized is a blend of both the anxious attachment and the
Mm-hmm.
avoidant attachment. And usually that actually forms in children with a history of abuse, which is super sad. So they learn that their mom maybe is someone they need to cling to, but then also other times maybe their mom is scary. So then they have to run away and they have to do avoidant attachment to survive. Um, Sue, can you think of
Right.
any examples, maybe from the children you worked with at Bethany Christian Service, maybe an example of
Mm-hmm.
maybe disorganized attachment or some attachment injury?
Well, like if a mother suffers with depression, and so the mother's so depressed she can't care for her child. The child experiences avoidance, and it's very confusing. They usually a child will blame themselves, think it's their fault. So that's pretty typical of what happens to a child.
So
Yeah,
sad.
a person's mental health affects how they attach to their children.
It's an important point. I think it's a great
Mm-hmm.
motivator for any of us listening in that if
Mm-hmm.
you are a parent now, that you want to be the healthiest
Mm-hmm.
that you can be to be a great parent. If you are, I've heard it described by other people, if you are a pre-parent, like you want to be a parent someday,
Right.
then really start working on yourself now
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
someday, Lord willing, hopefully you can be a healthy
Mm-hmm.
parent to your
Yes.
children. 'Cause your child needs you to show up as your healthiest and best self, even if you have to change things in life. If you have to quit a job, maybe working for a
Mm-hmm.
boss who maybe
Mm-hmm.
drives you into a more avoidant type of way of relating because it feels safer.
Yeah.
Maybe it means, going to sit down with a therapist and talking about
Mm-hmm.
maybe a messy childhood you had yourself, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that healing looks like owning it instead of putting it on the child who cannot heal
Mm-hmm.
you and who deserves your best.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And then family systems. So,
Mm-hmm.
with this particular theory in mental health, I have found this
Mm-hmm.
one very helpful as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you know that you've ever had any complicated relationships in your family, it can actually
Mm-hmm.
really help you grow in awareness of what's going on with that and how you're
Mm-hmm.
relating to that, how you're impacted by it.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we know how we're impacted by something, we're going to make a lot
Mm-hmm.
better choices and how we respond to it than if we're just kind of unaware and just maybe emotional from a bad
Mm-hmm.
situation, and just
Mm-hmm.
maybe more reactive that way. So if you want to be more thoughtful in your approach to
Mm-hmm.
maybe a difficult family situation, family systems is so helpful where you take some time
Mm-hmm.
and you reflect on your
Mm-hmm.
family, how it's impacted you. There's a workbook people could use called the family genogram or something, and it's just about
Mm-hmm.
diagramming your family and the relationships that you have with
Mm-hmm.
people. It's specifically about your perspective, not like trying to imagine everybody's perspective of you or
Right.
other people, but just your perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and how you can be more healthy in that. How would you describe the family systems theory, and how do you use it with your
Mm-hmm.
clients to help them relate in
Mm-hmm.
a more healthy way in their family?
Yeah, I try to help people see what their role is in their family, what role they're playing, and is that a healthy role for them? And we can't control other people in a family system, but we want to have the healthiest role we can have. And so when there you are with awareness again, if you can identify what your role is, then you can take a step back and make a healthy choice. Otherwise, it controls you.
Right. And something that I've heard you mention before that I think is very helpful is sometimes if there is something kind of messy happening in a family,
Hmm.
something, maybe a little troubled somehow, there is this diagram you use sometimes to
Hmm.
describe when relationships start going to a more enmeshed direction. What is that
Hmm.
tool you use with people?
Yeah, the Cartman family drama triangle. And so that the just like it says, the triangle, there's a rescuer, a victim, and an abuser. And so sometimes people get in those roles, sometimes they move around those roles in a family. It can happen in a workplace, it can happen in a church setting, and to see it for what it is and take a step back and say, "Oh, I'm going to step out of this. It's not healthy." That's one
Right.
of the clearest cut things to look at.
And then how do you take that whole theory of family systems and then it kind of switches around a little bit with internal family
Hmm.
systems, but there are a
Yeah,
lot of similarities between the two. How would you
yeah.
describe that? And then how is it used with your clients?
You mean the internal family system?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's just like the regular family system. There's people with different parts that have different roles. So inside of you, you have an internal family system. So you have memories when you were different ages, and those memories play into your decisions, to the way you behave, the way you feel, the way you act, your choices. And so, again, when you become aware and take care of your whole system, it's going to be healthier. But you can't be healthy if you're not aware of it.
And then how would you describe cognitive behavioral therapy and what is
Hmm.
its value for people who are healing from mental
Yeah.
health problems?
Yeah. That's just simply cognition is looking at how you're thinking. And so like we talked about earlier, as a child, you build up a whole belief system inside, and then when you become an adult, you're like aware of how those thoughts, those cognitions affect you, cause you to act a certain way, believe a certain way. And so when you start looking at those thoughts, especially if you're a follower of Christ, follower of the Word of God, lining up those thoughts, harmonizing with what's true about you, you have a lot more freedom in life to be really who you were meant to be, not to be hampered by those old thoughts that are negative. I mean, it sounds simple, but it takes a lot of work.
It sure does. And
Yeah.
one of those things you do when you're doing this deep work with people is you are highly skilled at building trust. I would not say that
Mhm.
about every person I've met. Sometimes you meet people and you're like, woo, I'm immediately not trusting them permanently because they
Uh-huh.
have got some stuff going on.
Uh-huh.
But I have told you before that when I first came to see you about 10 years ago, you had like this
Mhm.
adolescent Cassidy. I was about 16, and I decided before I came in to see you, I'd never met you. I decided not to
Mhm.
trust you. It's not
Mhm.
your fault, but I'd gone through a
Mhm.
lot in my family, and a lot of people had not been compassionate to me when I
Mhm.
described the things going on in my family. My parents were getting separated, and
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
encountered a lot of people that, so for example, where I had had some community at the time, if I talked about my family separating, I felt like it would turn into gossip and that people would just start gossiping about me. So
Mhm.
I was very, very, very guarded and very careful about what I said about my
Mhm.
family, not because I didn't need help. I needed
Mhm.
so much help, Sue. I was drowning in my depression. I was
Mhm.
unwell, but I
Uh-huh.
didn't feel like I could receive help because some
Right.
people around me were very gossipy and like just not
Right.
kind and not genuine. And so I
Right.
came in and I meet you and you start talking to me very
Mhm.
kindly. And
Mhm.
I just didn't buy it at first. To be honest, I was like, no, this can't be
Mhm.
real. She's not that
Mhm.
kind. Like, she's not that nice. And
Mhm.
you are highly skilled at building trust because even though at
Mhm.
first I came to you with some suspicion, I also didn't know if I agreed with
Mhm.
mental health. I thought maybe all of mental health is unbiblical,
Mhm.
I also had some of those
Mhm.
beliefs at the time. And it was
Mhm.
just this incredible grace you showed me. We built a relationship, one
Mhm.
little hour-long meeting at a time.
Mhm.
We met like 2 times a month,
Mhm.
and I was this adolescent who was not
Mhm.
okay. And it took an awful long time for me to
Mhm.
feel comfortable. But eventually
Mhm.
I started to really let you know, like, this is what I'm actually struggling with. This is what I
Right.
actually need help with. Can you show
Right.
me what I should do about X, Y, and Z? What are some ideas of how I could handle that?
Yeah.
I started to really share that with you. And so I'd
Mhm.
love to ask you, there are people listening in who would like to be better at building
Mhm.
trust with the people in their life.
Mhm.
How can they build more trust with people around them? And what are
Mhm.
the behaviors that shut down trust?
Mhm. People have to have a safe place. You had to feel safe. And so That's why Carl Rogers is so important because you have positive regard for that person that you're listening to, wherever they're at in life. That's where they're at, and you accept them, and you have positive regard for them. You have empathy for them, and you sit with that, and you make that a safe place. And so the theory is that's one of the most benefits of therapy is having a safe place and a good relationship so you can share because nobody wants to share when they don't feel safe.
So, what are some behaviors that immediately cause people to lose trust in another person?
I think when they're judged, it's no fun being judged.
Yeah,
Hmm.
judgment is definitely something that
Hmm.
shuts people down for sure.
Hmm.
Sometimes I like to think of you in some ways as like my third grandmother. So I like to call you because you just remind me of my grandma killing back, my mom's mom, who's
Okay.
just a very wonderful person that I really
Oh,
love a lot.
thanks.
And I would just say to anyone listening and who knows that their mental health needs some healing,
Hmm.
it's possible that maybe you need to be more open-minded to receiving help
Hmm.
from maybe someone who reminds you of a positive relationship, like you maybe reminding me of my
Hmm.
grandma. Because as I mentioned, at the time when I
Hmm.
first came to therapy, when I was about 16, a lot of the women my age and even in their 20s were not always terribly kind to me. I feel like I
Hmm.
had a lot of negative experiences,
Hmm.
like with groups of young women my age. Some of them were very like
Hmm.
backstabbing and unkind to me. And so it helped me to receive therapy from someone who
Hmm.
is my grandma's age because I felt
Hmm.
more safe talking to you,
Yeah.
and I could see that you were someone that had a lot of stability and
Hmm.
maturity in your life. And so I think for anyone listening and who knows, like their mental health needs some
Hmm.
work. Like there's maybe some
Hmm.
severe depression or anxiety or OCD or just
Hmm.
relationship problems that are going on. I
Hmm.
think I would encourage people to like consider who in their life has been a safe place and then to like be
Hmm.
willing to like look for a therapist in your area. Maybe they remind
Hmm.
you of a safe person that you have known, like my grandma.
Hmm.
And there's also a book that you recommended I read about how to become more discerning about people, and how
Oh.
to
Hmm.
find out if people mean well to you or maybe
Hmm.
don't. What is that
Right.
book and why do you recommend that to people?
It's called Safe People by Dr. Henry Cloud, and it just helps people define what a safe person is, what an unsafe person is. It's a real simple, straightforward book, very practical. Hmm. So
Yeah.
if you're not sure, that's a good book to read.
For many of us, I think there is kind of a lifelong journey of growing in
Hmm.
discernment about our relationships and learning
Hmm.
to discern if someone's actually a safe place for you or maybe not. And
Hmm.
so, what do you think we can do as individuals to become more safe people so others can trust us
Hmm.
and we can be a safe
Hmm.
place for them, maybe when they're going through something with their mental health?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, to understand um, the value of each person and accept each person for for where they're at and to listen to them and just to be that safe person, to be trustworthy, to not judge that person. People are just where they are. Nobody wants to be judged.
How do you show them that gentleness though? Because, right, even if we try to avoid judgment, sometimes, like I unfortunately, being a firstborn girl, I can fall into some judgmental
Hmm.
attitude
Hmm.
sometimes because I'm like, this is how it
Hmm.
is, it's black and white. So what
Hmm.
are some practical ways we can show others that gentleness so they feel
Hmm.
more at peace around us?
Well, I think if you look at Jesus Christ in the Bible, when he walked the earth, he was very kind to people. And he was aware of people life. He knew things that were not in line with God's truth, yet he was very loving and patient and kind. And so I think that's our goal to model his love and grace to people. And we don't have to like everything they're doing or not doing, but we, we are called to love people, love God and love people. That's what's the greatest commandments. I think those are the safest people.
Yeah, absolutely. That love makes a huge
Hmm.
difference. You can always tell the
Hmm.
difference between a person who's trying to act loving
Hmm.
and then someone who actually genuinely loves. Like it just is
Hmm.
so different.
Hmm.
Um, so, Sue, what are your top tips for someone who's listening in and they're having a problem with their mental health? Maybe they're
Hmm.
really struggling with depression or anxiety. They're having a hard time functioning in their day-to-day life. What would you tell them?
Hmm. Yeah, I would say seek help. Sometimes people ask a friend, have you been to a therapist? Is it helpful? Sometimes you can go to your church if you're a church attender, and they usually have a list of therapists that would be helpful. And so that's pretty much, sometimes people ask their medical doctor. That's another source.
What are the best books you have read on mental health and books you would want someone else to pick up?
Wow, what's the best ones? Hmm. Probably a pretty basic would be Changes That Heal by Henry Cloud. That helps explain the whole thing about childhood and how it affects us and the belief system. That's a good one to start with. Changes That Heal.
That sounds like a good book. You're a very
Hmm.
like voracious reader, though, Sue. Are there any others that come to mind?
Oh, what else would I recommend? I think I'd have to consider somebody's background. That would make a difference. Yeah, I would try to find something they would be comfortable with.
Hmm. That makes sense. Maybe someone struggling with depression, what you'd recommend for them?
Mm, there's a lot of good books on depression. Well, there's an old classic, Tell Yourself the Truth. That's a good book. And that goes basically cognitive behavior therapy. But when somebody comes to depression, is like you said earlier, there's a lot of things to consider. Are they taking good care of themselves, getting enough sleep and rest? So you have to address all those things.
Hmm.
Hmm. And then read a good book.
Yes, very true. Something I've learned by going through therapy myself and trying to address my own personal issues and
Hmm.
just things I've gone through in my family
Hmm.
is that, God does expect me to be a good steward of myself. And it's not a waste of
Hmm.
time
Right,
to steward my well-being, which I did think
right.
it was when I was an adolescent. For whatever reason, I held that view that, like,
Hmm.
oh, I can't be spending too much time on myself and I can't, whatever. Like, I just believed it was immediate
Hmm.
selfishness. But there
Hmm.
is a difference between self-driven behaviors that are
Hmm.
actual selfishness and then
Right,
being a good steward of your body and your mind for
right.
God's glory. And once I learned that and I got kind of past that
Yes,
little adolescent bump, and I was like,
yes.
you know what? No, it's very, if I want to
Hmm.
honor God with my body, I need to
Hmm.
sleep enough if I can. You can't
Hmm.
always, but try to. I need to try to eat decent food. I need to, try to rest enough in
Hmm.
my life. And once I began to prioritize those things, it's amazing what
Hmm.
an impact that has on your mental health when you
Hmm.
just decide to own it. Just say, I'm not going to wait
Yep.
for someone to save me or something. I'm going to look at
Right,
my life and
right.
say, God expects me with his help and with the help of other
Hmm.
people to take good
Hmm.
care of myself. And if I'm not going to do
Hmm.
that, then
Hmm.
that there are going to be some, consequences in my mental and
Right,
physical health.
right. Absolutely.
Yeah. What I would love to ask in closing is what
Hmm.
are your final thoughts on the topic of
Hmm.
mental health and
Hmm.
things that people should keep in mind on their
Hmm.
journey through
Hmm.
life with, taking care of their mind and their body?
Hmm. Hmm. Everybody's valuable. And if you don't respect yourself, you don't care for yourself, you can't be who God created you to be. And so if you're having trouble, you're stuck, talk to somebody about it. There's all kinds of resources to help people.
The topic of mental health is one that's really impacted my life, and that's why I wanted to have Sue on today to have this important conversation. And I hope you took something away from it that hopefully will bless your journey or maybe someone you know who's struggling with their mental health. We are all valuable in the eyes of God, and every single life is important. We are all individuals before God, and the world is better because you're in it. I'm thankful that you're here. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe to the show on Apple and Spotify.